A married couple, Liam and Olivia Hayes, suddenly disappears from their suburban home in Oak Haven, New Hampshire. Neighbors in CCTV last saw them returning from a grocery run. Their families search for them until the case goes cold after 9 years. Then they are found buried under the cement floor of their own home, and the perpetrator remains a mystery.
Liam and Olivia Hayes, he 39, she 37, married for 12 sun-dappled, argument-punctuated, deeply affectionate years, were the kind of couple that formed the very bedrock of a community like Oak Haven, New Hampshire. Liam, a pragmatic and unfailingly good-humored software engineer for a burgeoning Boston-based tech firm, often worked from the sunlit spare bedroom he'd converted into a home office, his cheerful, if slightly tuneless whistling a familiar and comforting sound to those passing by on their morning walks. Olivia, a kindergarten teacher at Oak Haven Elementary, possessed an infectious, boundless enthusiasm and a genuine, almost maternal love for her young charges, her pockets invariably filled with stray Lego pieces, glitter that seemed to defy all attempts at containment, confiscated slingshots, and sticky sweet wrappers. Their home, a charming 2-story colonial with neatly trimmed boxwood hedges and Olivia's meticulously tended flower beds, a riot of seasonal color from early spring tulips to late autumn chrysanthemums, was a recognized hub of warmth and easy hospitality. Their Saturday mornings were a symphony of contented domesticity, the rich, nutty aroma of Olivia's freshly baked banana bread or scones mingling with the robust scent of dark roast coffee, the rhythmic hum of Liam's state-of-the-art lawnmower in the summer months, or the determined scrape of his snow shovel against the flagstone path in the depths of New England winters. They were, by all accounts and to all observers, a deeply contented and loving couple, financially stable, actively involved in local charities. Olivia volunteered at the animal shelter, Liam coached Pee-wee soccer, and cherished by a wide, diverse circle of friends and family. Their plans for the near future were common knowledge amongst their close friends: a long-awaited, meticulously planned anniversary trip to the Amalfi Coast in Italy the following spring, and Olivia had confided in Martha over a shared cup of tea just weeks before, their quiet, hopeful discussions about finally starting a family. The last confirmed, undisputed sighting of Liam and Olivia had been on that seemingly ordinary, sun-drenched Saturday afternoon. Crisp, clear CCTV footage retrieved from Oak Haven Grocers, the town's bustling main supermarket, time-stamped at precisely 3:47 p.m., showed them in aisle 3, the cereal aisle. Liam, a playful, teasing grin illuminating his face, was attempting to juggle 2 oversized boxes of what looked like sugary children's cereal, while Olivia, laughing heartily, tried to rescue them before they toppled. They looked relaxed, happy, their shopping basket already filled with the mundane yet comforting ingredients of a weekend at home: fresh asparagus and new potatoes, a plump roasting chicken destined for Sunday dinner, a bottle of their favorite Cabernet Sauvignon, and a small, indulgent tub of artisanal ice cream Olivia particularly loved. Later, a traffic camera positioned at the busy intersection of Elm Street and Oakwood Avenue, a few short blocks from their home, captured their familiar dark blue Subaru sedan making a right turn onto Maple Drive at approximately 4:30 p.m. The groceries, it was logically, indisputably assumed, were purchased, driven home, and likely put away in their usual organized places. After that moment, after that turn onto their quiet, tree-lined street, there was nothing. Max, their usually boisterous retriever, whose excited barks often heralded any arrival at the Hayes home, was found by a worried Martha in the Hayes' securely fenced backyard on Monday afternoon, his water ball bone dry, a low, anxious whine his only greeting. Their car sat silent and locked in the driveway, exactly where Liam always parked it. The back door was locked, the front door was double-bolted, seemingly from the inside, a detail that would later become a significant point of contention and chilling speculation. By Tuesday morning, a rising crescendo of unanswered, increasingly frantic calls from Olivia's younger sister, Sarah Chen, an art student in Providence, and Liam's equally anxious elderly parents in their peaceful Vermont retirement community, spurred Martha Peterson into an action she instinctively knew she would later question, but felt compelled to take. Armed with the spare key the Hayes had entrusted to her years ago for dire emergencies, a burst pipe in winter, a forgotten package needing shelter from the rain, Martha, her heart hammering against her ribs, accompanied by another concerned neighbor, Tom Henderson, a stoic, retired firefighter whose calm demeanor usually soothed her anxieties but now seemed to mirror her own unease, pushed open the front door of 312 Maple Drive. The immediate silence that greeted them was absolute, a profound absence of sound that felt heavier and more ominous than any noise. The house was eerily, unnaturally pristine, as if its occupants had just stepped out for a moment, yet it was a stillness imbued with a sense of wrongness. A half-finished, brightly colored 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle depicting a sun-drenched Tuscan landscape lay on the polished surface of the antique coffee table in the living room, a single, oddly shaped piece resting beside it, waiting to be placed. In the kitchen, the scent of recently brewed coffee still faintly lingered. Fresh groceries, milk, eggs, the plump roasting chicken, the crisp asparagus were neatly stored in their designated spots in the refrigerator and pantry. Upstairs, the master bed was smoothly made, Olivia's favorite lavender-scented sachet resting on the pillow. Clothes were neatly folded in drawers or hung meticulously in closets. Their wallets, credit cards, Liam's ever-present Swiss Army knife, Olivia's reading glasses, and, most disturbingly and inexplicably, their cell phones were gone. The car keys, however, which Liam always, without fail, hung on a small, whimsical brass hook shaped like a squirrel by the kitchen door, were still there, glinting innocently in a stray beam of sunlight. There were no signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no drawers pulled open in haste, no hastily scrawled note of explanation, no indication whatsoever of a planned or even a panicked departure. It was as if Liam and Olivia Hayes, along with their beloved golden retriever Max, had simply dematerialized, vanishing into the ether from within the solid, comforting, and supposedly secure four walls of their own cherished home. The Oak Haven Police Department was immediately summoned, and soon the smiling, hopeful, achingly alive faces of Liam and Olivia stared out from an ever-increasing number of missing persons posters tacked on the telephone poles, pinned to community notice boards, and taped to the windows of local businesses throughout Oak Haven and the surrounding counties. Their cheerful, oblivious expressions, a chilling, silent counterpoint to the town's burgeoning, unspoken, and deeply unsettling fear. The initial police investigation into the sudden, baffling, and utterly inexplicable disappearance of Liam and Olivia Hayes was a maelstrom of intense, round-the-clock activity that with each passing week yielded progressively less, spiraling inexorably into a vortex of dead-end leads, frustrating conjecture, and unanswered, increasingly desperate questions. Oak Haven detectives, their ranks quickly augmented by seasoned investigators from the New Hampshire State Police, descended upon the Maple Drive home, transforming its cozy, lived-in domesticity into a sterile, gridded landscape of potential evidence. They meticulously dusted every conceivable surface, from window panes to light switches to the spines of the books lining the living room shelves, for latent fingerprints. They sprayed luminol throughout the house, its eerie blue glow revealing nothing more sinister than residual cleaning product in the bathrooms. They examined drains and plumbing traps for traces of blood or tissue, tore up sections of loose floorboards in the older parts of the house, and even brought in cadaver dogs whose sensitive noses, to everyone's profound relief and yet deeper mystification, remained stubbornly unagitated within the house and its immediate surroundings. Max, the retriever, was a mystery too. Had he been taken with them, or had he met a separate, equally silent fate? Every conceivable theory was explored, debated, and ultimately reluctantly discarded. Had they, despite all outward appearances, orchestrated their own disappearance, seeking to escape some unknown pressure or start a new life elsewhere? Unlikely, argued the lead detective at the time, a grizzled veteran named Captain Miller, given the comfortable life they had meticulously built, the deeply personal items left behind. Olivia's grandmother's antique amethyst locket, a family heirloom she cherished, lay nestled in its velvet box on her dresser. Liam's favorite worn leather armchair, molded to the contours of his body, sat empty and expectant by the fireplace. And the complete and utter lack of any financial preparations, no large cash withdrawals, no newly opened accounts that would inevitably accompany such a drastic flight. Had they been targeted for a random violent robbery? Possible, of course, but the house showed absolutely no signs of forced entry, and valuables such as Olivia's jewelry, Liam's collection of vintage watches, and their home electronics were all present and untouched. A sudden, impulsive trip? A spur-of-the-moment elopement from their own lives? Their passports remained securely tucked away in a desk drawer, alongside maps and guidebooks for their anticipated Italian sojourn. The police delved deeply into Liam's work as a software engineer, searching for disgruntled clients, evidence of corporate espionage, or involvement in any sensitive projects that might have made him a target, but found only a commendable record of successful projects, positive performance reviews, and amicable professional relationships. Olivia's life as a beloved kindergarten teacher was an open book of finger paints, sing-alongs, meticulously planned lesson plans, and grateful, adoring parents. The sheer, impenetrable absence of any tangible lead, any discernible motive, any whisper of a threat was maddening, not just for the investigators, but for the families clinging desperately to any sliver of hope. For Olivia's younger sister, Sarah Chen, then a vibrant, fiercely independent art student on the cusp of her final year at Rhode Island School of Design, the silence that descended like a suffocating shroud after the initial flurry of police activity and media attention was an unbearable, living torment. Her art, once a source of joy and expression, became a painful reminder of Olivia's encouragement. She effectively put her own life, her ambitions, her very future on indefinite hold, her youthful energy and creativity channeled into a desperate, almost manic, single-minded crusade to find her sister and husband-in-law. She plastered those haunting missing person flyers with their achingly familiar smiles, not just in Oakhaven, but throughout New England, her car filled with stacks of paper and rolls of tape. She organized and led volunteer search parties, small, dwindling groups of friends, sympathetic strangers, and occasionally off-duty police officers who meticulously combed the dense, unforgiving woodlands of the nearby White Mountains National Forest and the banks of the Lamprey Wither, their hopeful calls of "Liam! Olivia!" swallowed by the indifferent rustle of leaves and the murmur of flowing water. She hounded the Oakhaven Police Department for updates, her initial respectful, almost timid inquiries slowly morphing over the months into frustrated, tearful, sometimes angry demands for answers they simply didn't possess. She created a website, findliamandolivia.com, a digital beacon of hope in a sea of despair, filled with photographs, timelines, detailed descriptions, and heartfelt pleas for any information, no matter how insignificant it might seem. Its visitor counter, initially active with clicks from concerned citizens and internet sleuths, became a slowly, painfully dwindling testament to fading public interest and the relentless march of time. One particularly cruel false alarm, a call from a truck stop waitress in Maine who thought she'd seen a couple matching their description, sent Sarah on a frantic 6-hour drive, only to find her hopes brutally dashed. The emotional whiplash was devastating.
Liam's parents, Eleanor and David Sr., a retired, gentle couple whose quiet Vermont existence had been irrevocably shattered, poured their modest retirement savings into hiring a succession of private investigators. These seasoned, somber-suited professionals, with their discreet inquiries and promises of fresh perspectives, retraced the official police steps, re-interviewed the same bewildered circle of acquaintances, delved into the same impenetrable financial records, and ultimately, inevitably, arrived at the same maddeningly blank, unyielding wall of silence. The shared tragedy, instead of forging a tighter bond between Olivia's and Liam's families, sometimes created a subtle, unspoken tension, each family grieving in their own way, each harboring their own private theories and unspoken resentments about what might have happened or what more could be done. As months bled into the first anniversary, then the second, the sharp, agonizing edges of the initial shock and frantic activity began to dull for the wider Oak Haven community, replaced by a resigned, sorrowful acceptance of the inexplicable. The missing persons posters, sun-bleached, rain-streaked, and tattered at the edges, were eventually discreetly taken down by town maintenance crews, their hopeful smiles now a painful, almost mocking reminder of a mystery that stubbornly refused to yield its secrets. The Oak Haven Police Department, facing the relentless pressure of new, more immediate crimes and dwindling municipal budgets, officially designated the Hayes disappearance as inactive pending further developments, the polite, sterile, bureaucratic term for a cold case, a file relegated to a dusty shelf in a forgotten archive room. The house on Maple Drive, after being meticulously processed, reprocessed, and held as a potential crime scene for over a year, was eventually, with heavy hearts, released back to the grieving, bewildered families. Neither Sarah nor Liam's parents could bear the thought of living within those walls. Each room, each familiar object, echoing with too many joyful memories, now irrevocably tainted by an unbearable, suffocating sorrow. After another year of sitting empty and silent, its windows like vacant, unseeing eyes staring out onto the quiet cul-de-sac, a forlorn monument to its missing owners and their vanished golden retriever, it was sold as is by the estate. The disclosure of its tragic, unsettling history was a hushed, reluctant, legally mandated addendum to the sale agreement. The new out-of-state buyers, the Thompsons, were a young family drawn by the allure of New England charm, good schools, and a significantly, almost suspiciously, reduced price. They were perhaps less attuned to the lingering, unspoken disquiet that the house held for many longtime Oak Haven residents. Life in Oak Haven, as it inevitably, resiliently does, continued its forward march. New families moved on to Maple Drive, their children's bright, uncomplicated laughter replacing the eerie, heavy quiet that had once enveloped the Hayes home. The story of the vanished couple slowly, subtly transformed, becoming less of an active, raw wound for the community at large, and more of a piece of local folklore, a chilling, cautionary tale whispered at Halloween gatherings, a somber, almost legendary anecdote shared with newcomers about the nice young couple who had simply walked out of their seemingly perfect lives, or perhaps, as some of the more imaginative and superstitious townsfolk speculated in low voices at the local diner, had been victims of something truly bizarre, something otherworldly, something that defied all rational explanation. For Sarah Chen, however, there was no such distancing, no gentle fading into folklore. The unanswered, unanswerable questions became a permanent, unwelcome, intractable resident in her own life. She eventually, haltingly, finished her art degree, her final thesis a haunting series of abstract paintings exploring themes of absence and unresolved loss. She married a kind, patient, understanding man named Ben, who knew Olivia's story and respected Sarah's enduring grief. They had two beautiful, lively children of their own, but the ghost of their beloved sister Olivia, her bright smile, her infectious laugh, her unwavering optimism, and the ghost of her jovial, steadfast brother-in-law Liam, remained a constant, silent, palpable presence at every family celebration. Every holiday dinner, their empty chairs a tangible, heartbreaking manifestation of her unresolved sorrow and the gnawing uncertainty of their fate. 9 long, silent, arduous years slipped by, each one etching deeper lines of sorrow and weariness onto the faces of those who had loved Liam and Olivia, each one solidifying the silence from Maple Drive into what seemed like an impenetrable, eternal wall.
The Thompson family, Mark, a pragmatic architect, Susan, a busy freelance graphic designer, and their 2 energetic young children, 8-year-old Emily and 6-year-old Josh, had, for nearly 6 years, made 312 Maple Drive their home. They were aware, in a general sense, of its somber history. Such a significant local event was impossible to entirely suppress, even for newcomers. Their realtor had mentioned it briefly, couched in careful, non-alarming terms. But they had been drawn by the house's solid structure, its spacious yard, its location in an excellent school district, and undeniably by a purchase price that was considerably below market value, a clear reflection of its tragic, lingering stigma. For years, they lived ordinary, bustling, happy lives within its walls, filling the rooms with the comforting chaos of spilled juice boxes, scattered Lego bricks, bedtime stories, and family movie nights. The house's past was a distant, almost abstract shadow, rarely discussed, though Susan sometimes admitted to a faint, inexplicable chill she occasionally felt in the far corner of the basement, a draft she could never quite locate, dismissing it as a quirk of an old house. Emily, too, had once mentioned a sad lady she sometimes thought she saw in her dreams, but Susan had gently brushed it off as an overactive childhood imagination. In the 9th year after Liam and Olivia Hayes had inexplicably, utterly vanished from the face of the earth, the Thompsons, having diligently saved and meticulously planned, decided it was time for a significant, much-needed renovation. Their primary, ambitious goal was to transform the damp, largely utilitarian concrete-floored basement, a dim, sprawling space currently housing the hulking furnace, the rumbling water heater, a labyrinth of cobweb-draped pipes, and an assortment of forgotten Christmas decorations and outgrown children's toys, into a bright, welcoming, fully finished playroom for Emily and Josh, and a desperately needed quiet home office for Mark. This ambitious, transformative project necessitated, as its first and most disruptive step, breaking up large sections of the old, uneven concrete floor to install proper French drains, insulate the foundation walls against the damp New England chill, and lay a new, perfectly level concrete foundation upon which their dream basement could be built. It was a sweltering, oppressive Tuesday in late August, the kind of day where the New England humidity hung heavy and thick in the air, making every breath feel like an effort, when the contractors, a local crew known for their efficiency and no-nonsense approach, began their noisy, earth-shattering work. The rhythmic, deafening, bone-jarring roar of an industrial-grade jackhammer vibrated through the Thompson house from early morning, its relentless assault echoing down the normally quiet, well-manicured cul-de-sac of Maple Drive, a jarring, unwelcome disruption to the lazy summer languor. Neighbors, roused from their morning coffee or startled from their gardening, peeked from behind lace curtains, their expressions a mixture of annoyance at the din and a vague neighborly curiosity about the extent of the Thompsons' renovations. Mid-afternoon, around 3 p.m., when the sun was at its scorching zenith, the relentless, punishing jackhammering abruptly, shockingly ceased. A different kind of silence descended, this one sudden, taut, and profoundly unnerving. A few minutes later, one of the contractors, a burly, heavily tattooed man named Mike Rourke, his face usually ruddy from exertion, but now an unhealthy, mottled shade of gray beneath his tan and a layer of fine concrete dust, stumbled out of the basement bulkhead entrance, his eyes wide and staring with a primal, unfiltered horror that had absolutely nothing to do with the physical exertion of his demanding job. He leaned heavily against the clapboard side of the house, gasping for air as if he'd surfaced from a deep, dark dive, before urgently, frantically calling for Mark Thompson. "Mr. Thompson, you gotta come down here, right now, and you gotta call the police. You gotta call them right now." Mark Thompson, initially irritated by the sudden cessation of work, but now thoroughly bewildered and increasingly concerned by Mike Rourke's evident terror, followed the shaken contractor back down the steep, narrow basement stairs. The air in the basement was thick and cloying with freshly disturbed concrete dust which caught in his throat, and something else. A faint, yet profoundly unsettling, sickly sweet, earthy odor he hadn't noticed on his previous visits to the space. Mike, still trembling, pointed towards a section of the floor near the old, hulking, silent furnace, where the jackhammer had evidently broken through the concrete with an unexpected, disconcerting ease. A dark, irregular, ragged-edged cavity had been revealed, gaping like an open, festering wound in the gray, dusty expanse of the basement floor. And nestled within that cavity, shrouded in multiple layers of decaying, heavy-duty black plastic sheeting, were shapes, forms that were unmistakably, horrifyingly, sickeningly human. Two forms, huddled closely together, almost intertwined, in the cold, unyielding, unforgiving earth that had served as their silent, completely undiscovered, unimaginably tragic tomb for nearly a decade. The Oak Haven Police Department, alerted by Mark Thompson's shocked, almost incoherent emergency call, descended upon Maple Drive once more, this time with a grim, palpable sense of foreboding that chilled the humid summer air. The Thompson house, which for 6 years had been a place of ordinary, unexceptional family life, was instantly, irrevocably transformed back into a major, active crime scene. Yellow police tape, stark and jarring against the cheerful yellow of the house's exterior, fluttered ominously in the late summer breeze, cordoning off the property, casting long, dancing, macabre shadows on the manicured lawn. State forensic teams, their faces grim and set, their movements practiced and somber, soon joined the local Oak Haven officers, their white vans lining the quiet suburban street. The news, as such news inevitably does in a small town, spread through Oak Haven with the speed and devastating ferocity of a wildfire. The old, half-forgotten fears and morbid speculations of 9 years prior reigniting with a terrifying, visceral new intensity. This wasn't a mystery about a couple who had simply left town anymore. This was something far darker, something monstrous, something that had lurked unseen, unsuspected in the very heart of their safe, familiar community. For the families of Liam and Olivia Hayes, the phone call they had both profoundly, desperately dreaded, and yet, in some dark, unacknowledged, secret recess of their hearts, almost perversely, morbidly expected, for 9 long, agonizing years, finally, irrevocably, came. Sarah Chen was in the middle of a parent-teacher conference for her eldest child when her cell phone buzzed insistently, with the Oak Haven Police Department caller ID displayed on its small screen. Her blood ran cold, her hand instinctively flying to her mouth to stifle a gasp. Liam's elderly parents, Eleanor and David Sr., received the news in the sun-dappled tranquility of their Vermont retirement home. The carefully chosen, sympathetic but firm words of the police liaison officer on the other end of the line, shattering their fragile, carefully constructed peace into a million irreparable pieces. The preliminary identification, based on dental records meticulously kept on file from the original frustrating missing persons case, confirmed the unthinkable, the unimaginable, the absolute worst of all possible nightmares. The bodies exhumed with painstaking care from the shallow, concrete-capped grave beneath the basement floor of 312 Maple Drive were, indeed, unquestionably, those of Liam and Olivia Hayes.
The sheer, unadulterated horror of the discovery was compounded exponentially by its intimate, almost sacrilegious location. They hadn't run away to start new, anonymous lives. They hadn't been the unfortunate victims of a random, tragic accident or a violent crime in some distant, impersonal place. They had been there all along, entombed in the cold, damp, unforgiving earth beneath the very floors of their own cherished home, while seasons turned, holidays came and went, new families laughed and lived and slept and dreamed, all unknowingly, just a few feet above their hidden, silent grave. The 9-year-old, frustratingly cold mystery of the missing Hayes couple was now officially, horrifically, the active, high-priority homicide of Liam and Olivia Hayes.
A new lead investigator, Detective Miles Harding, a stoic, quietly intense, methodical man with a formidable reputation for unearthing long-buried truths from the coldest and most complex of cases, was immediately dispatched from the New Hampshire State's renowned cold case unit. His task was monumental, almost Sisyphean, to unravel a 9-year-old intimately brutal crime where the victims had been found in the most personal and violated of settings, yet the how, the why, and most crucially, the deeply disturbing who remained a terrifying, absolute, gaping void. Detective Miles Harding was a man who navigated the labyrinthine corridors of past human despair with a practiced, somber proficiency. His office, tucked away in a quiet, unassuming corner of the state police headquarters, was an organized repository of forgotten sorrows and unresolved human tragedy. Its shelves were lined not with commendations or personal mementos, but with the heavy, somber binders of cold cases, each thick file a silent, poignant testament to lives violently interrupted, to justice long delayed, and often tragically denied. The Hayes case, however, possessed a uniquely chilling, almost visceral intimacy that settled uneasily even with a seasoned veteran like him. The brutal, calculated violation of their own home, the unthinkable notion of them lying undiscovered for so many years beneath the mundane routines of subsequent occupants. It spoke of a perpetrator who possessed either an unnerving, terrifying familiarity with the victims and their lives, or a capacity for unimaginable audacity, meticulous planning, and a profoundly disturbing, cold-blooded patience. Harding's first methodical, almost ritualistic step was to immerse himself completely in the voluminous original case files. He spent uninterrupted days, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a grim determination, reading every faded report, every transcribed witness statement, every speculative, hopeful, and ultimately fruitless investigative note, absorbing the frustrating circular narrative of an investigation that had commenced with a flurry of urgent activity and had inexorably dwindled into a quiet, resigned official dead end. He then initiated the painstaking, often disheartening process of re-interviewing everyone, even peripherally involved, from the original investigation a decade prior. Former Oak Haven police officers, many now retired and scattered across different states or promoted to different departments, were meticulously tracked down. Their memories of the specifics of the Hayes case were often understandably vague, softened and blurred by the relentless passage of time and the countless other cases, other tragedies, that had crossed their desks in the intervening years. Martha Peterson, Liam and Olivia's former next-door neighbor, recounted her initial, gnawing unease in the discovery of the empty house with a clarity that 9 years had not dimmed, her grief for the friendly, vibrant couple still sharp, palpable, and deeply personal. "They were such good people, Detective," she repeated, her voice trembling with a mixture of sorrow and a renewed, horrified anger. "Such kind, decent people. To think all this time they were right there. It's a monstrous, monstrous thing. The work of a devil."
Sarah Chen, Olivia's younger sister, became Harding's most vital, albeit emotionally fragile link to the victims, a living bridge to the lives Liam and Olivia had led. The intervening years had transformed her raw, frantic grief of her student days into a steely, quiet, unyielding determination. She met with Harding numerous times, her composure remarkably unwavering, though her eyes held a permanent shadow of sorrow. She provided him with Olivia's old, leather-bound diaries, their pages filled with her sister's cheerful, looping handwriting, detailing everyday joys, minor frustrations, and dreams for the future. She shared photograph albums overflowing with smiling, sunlit images of happier times. Liam and Olivia on hiking trips in the White Mountains, at boisterous family gatherings, beaming on their wedding day. She recounted countless anecdotes, small, intimate details that breathed life and personality into the fading images of Liam and Olivia, transforming them from static victim profiles back into the vibrant, complex individuals they had been. Olivia's last journal entries just before they disappeared
Sarah told Harding one afternoon, her voice thick with unshed emotion as she sat across from him in the sterile, impersonal interview room, a framed photo of Olivia and Liam clutched in her hands. She wrote about how much she was looking forward to their upcoming 12th wedding anniversary. They were planning a special weekend getaway to a little inn on the Maine coast they loved. She was even attempting to knit Liam a new scarf for it, a truly dreadful orange and bright green striped thing he would have undoubtedly pretended to adore just because she'd made it. These small, seemingly insignificant human details Harding knew from long, hard experience were often where the faint, almost invisible outlines of a motive or the subtle shadow of a suspect might unexpectedly begin to emerge. Harding's dedicated, hand-picked team meticulously, almost forensically, re-examined every facet of Liam and Olivia's lives, searching for any crack, any fissure in their seemingly idyllic existence. Were there any hidden, substantial debts that had suddenly, catastrophically come due? Olivia had a modest, manageable student loan from her teaching degree, which she was diligently, almost proudly, paying off in regular installments. Liam's personal and professional finances were robust, his investments sound and conservative. Any illicit, clandestine affairs? Their social circles were closely, almost claustrophobically intertwined. Their marriage, by all credible accounts, was a genuinely happy, mutually supportive, and deeply committed one. Professional jealousies or bitter rivalries? Liam had recently been promoted to a senior project manager at his tech firm, a position he had earned through hard work and talent. But his colleagues, when re-interviewed, spoke of him with unfeigned respect and admiration, tinged now with a profound retrospective sadness. Olivia was universally beloved by her kindergarten students, their parents, and her fellow teachers at Oak Haven Elementary, remembered for her boundless patience and her unwavering dedication. They seemed, with a frustrating, almost defiant, infuriating normality, to be exactly what they had appeared on the surface: a kind, well-adjusted, hard-working, and deeply loved couple with no discernible, plausible enemies. The physical evidence retrieved with painstaking care from the makeshift concrete-sealed grave in the basement was tragically, infuriatingly limited by the 9 relentless years of decomposition and the nature of their entombment. The autopsy confirmed that both Liam and Olivia had died from multiple instances of severe blunt force trauma to the head, injuries consistent with a violent, frenzied attack. The heavy-duty black plastic sheeting they had been wrapped in was a common, generic variety, its brand and origin impossible to trace after so long. The concrete poured over them to seal their tomb was a standard, readily available mix, the kind that could be purchased at any hardware store or prepared from basic components. The 9 intervening years had mercilessly degraded any potential trace evidence, fibers, hairs, foreign DNA, that the killer or killers might have inadvertently left behind. The scene, once a home, then a tomb, now yielded very few forensic whispers from the past.
The primary, frustrating focus of Harding's renewed investigation inevitably, unavoidably, shifted to the almost inconceivable, deeply disturbing how. How could 2 healthy, capable adults be violently murdered, presumably within the confines of their own home, and then meticulously, laboriously entombed in their basement without anyone in the quiet, close-knit, observant suburban cul-de-sac of Maple Drive seeing, hearing, or even sensing anything remotely suspicious or out of the ordinary? The original investigation had noted, with some puzzlement, that the house doors were found securely locked. Had the killer then possessed a key, a duplicate perhaps, or a chillingly intimate knowledge of their security habits? Had they been known to Liam and Olivia, welcomed into the house under some friendly, innocuous false pretense, only to have that trust brutally, fatally betrayed?
Or were Liam and Olivia ambushed immediately, perhaps even silently upon their return from Oak Haven Grocers that fateful Saturday afternoon? The mundane contents of their shopping bags, the roasting chicken, the fresh asparagus, and the bottle of Cabernet becoming a poignant, silent testament to a domestic evening that would never be. The CCTV footage showed them turning onto Maple Drive. Frustratingly, there was no further coverage on their specific street, no footage of any unusual vehicles following them, no reports of suspicious individuals loitering in the usually tranquil area. The contractors who had made the gruesome, life-altering discovery recalled, under repeated, detailed questioning, that the concrete in that particular section of the basement floor, the section directly above the makeshift grave, had seemed subtly, almost imperceptibly different in texture and color from the surrounding older areas, a slight variation in its aggregate, a marginally rougher finish. It was a subtle discrepancy that previous occupants, including the Thompsons, who had never before undertaken any major structural work in the basement, might easily have overlooked or simply attributed to an old, insignificant amateur repair. This minute detail suggested the killer possessed at least a rudimentary, practical knowledge of mixing and pouring concrete. Harding's team, with a growing sense of dread, explored the chilling, almost unthinkable possibility. Were Liam and Olivia killed elsewhere, their bodies then surreptitiously, audaciously transported back to their own home for that final, macabre, almost ritualistic burial? This scenario would necessitate an even greater, almost unimaginable level of meticulous, cold-blooded planning, a chilling, almost preternatural coolness under immense, prolonged pressure, and, most likely, the involvement of more than one perpetrator to manage the logistics of such a horrific, burdensome task. Every re-interview conducted, every re-examination of old bank statements, faded photographs, and 9-year-old phone records led Detective Harding and his dedicated, increasingly disheartened team deeper into a frustrating, seemingly endless labyrinth of pure speculation and tantalizing but ultimately insubstantial possibilities, but no closer to a tangible, credible suspect. The neighbors on Maple Drive were patiently, exhaustively interviewed yet again. Their memories of that specific, distant weekend 9 years ago were now inevitably, understandably, hazy, unreliable, clouded and distorted by the relentless passage of time and the countless ordinary, unremarkable days that had intervened and overlaid those critical hours. The original, very short list of persons of interest, compiled during the initial investigation, a disgruntled former business acquaintance of Liam's, who, it turned out, had an ironclad, verifiable alibi, a distant, somewhat estranged cousin of Olivia's with a documented history of petty crime but no known propensity for violence, all led once again to the same frustratingly solid, unyielding dead ends they had presented to investigators 9 years prior. The killer or killers, it seemed with a chilling, almost taunting certainty, had committed a monstrous, profoundly intimate crime and then, much like Liam and Olivia Hayes themselves had once appeared to do, had simply, utterly, inexplicably vanished without a single discernible trace, leaving behind only a cold, dark, echoing void where tangible answers and ultimately justice should have been. The renewed, high-profile investigation into the brutal homicides of Liam and Olivia Hayes, initially fueled by the shock of the discovery and a surge of determined optimism from Detective Harding's team, stretched from months into a full, frustrating year, then crawled inexorably, dispiritingly into a second. Detective Miles Harding, a man whose entire career was built upon a bedrock of unwavering patience, relentless perseverance, and meticulous, almost obsessive attention to the smallest of details, pursued every conceivable avenue, every whisper of a lead, however tenuous or improbable it seemed. He and his small, dedicated team constructed elaborate, color-coded timelines that cross-referenced witness statements with financial transactions and the sparse, often incomplete cell tower data available from 9 years prior. They even consulted with forensic geologists to analyze the mineral composition of soil samples taken from the basement grave, hoping for a stray, anomalous particle that might link to an unknown external location or a specific individual's profession or hobby. One particularly promising, albeit tenuous lead emerged nearly 18 months into the renewed investigation when an old, almost forgotten acquaintance of Liam's, re-interviewed for the third time, suddenly recalled Liam mentioning a minor but increasingly acrimonious dispute with a specific subcontractor over shoddy workmanship on a freelance software development project Liam had undertaken a few months before his disappearance. The subcontractor, a somewhat transient individual with a spotty work history and a rumored quick temper, was meticulously tracked down after weeks of searching, eventually located working on a construction site in a neighboring state. For several tense, hopeful weeks, a palpable buzz of anticipation energized Harding's team. This felt like it could be it. But the hope was cruelly, definitively extinguished when thorough, painstaking investigation, including verified employment records and witness corroboration, confirmed that the subcontractor had an ironclad, unshakable alibi. He had been out of state, working on a long-term documented project during the entire month Liam and Olivia had vanished. Another promising avenue narrowed into yet another frustrating dead end. Another thick layer of disheartening frustration settled over the already heavy case files.
For Sarah Chen and for Liam's frail, elderly parents, Eleanor and David Sr., the confirmation that Liam and Olivia had been brutally murdered, followed by the agonizingly slow, painstaking, and ultimately fruitless reinvestigation, was a unique and exquisitely cruel form of psychological torture. They finally, definitively, knew what had happened to Liam and Olivia, at least in the broadest, most brutal physical terms. They were able to give them a proper, dignified burial, to mourn them with a terrible finality rather than exist in the agonizing, unending limbo of the unknown. A plot was chosen in the quietest corner of the Oak Haven Cemetery, beneath the shade of a sprawling maple tree, and a simple, elegant granite headstone was erected, its polished surface engraved with Liam and Olivia's names, their dates of birth and death, the latter simply marked as the year of their disappearance, and a shared, heartbreaking inscription chosen by Sarah and Liam's parents, together forever, tragically parted, deeply loved. This physical place, this tangible marker, provided a much-needed focal point for their immense, multifaceted grief. Yet this small, hard-won solace was perpetually, cruelly undermined and eroded by the vast, echoing, tormenting emptiness of the unanswered who had committed such an unimaginable atrocity, and the even more elusive, maddening why. Without justice, without accountability, their grief remained an open, festering wound, resistant to the healing balm of time. Sarah found herself increasingly withdrawn, the vibrant, optimistic art student of her youth almost entirely eclipsed by a woman haunted by an unyielding, corrosive sorrow. She tried, for the sake of her husband Ben and their 2 young children, to find moments of joy, to create a semblance of normalcy in their lives, but the shadow of her sister's unsolved murder was a constant, unwelcome, intrusive companion. She found herself scanning faces in crowds, in grocery stores, at school events, her mind involuntarily, obsessively wondering if she was looking at the person, the monster, who had so brutally shattered her family. The knowledge that her beloved sister and brother-in-law had lain cold and alone, buried just beneath the mundane floorboards of their own cherished home, while life, oblivious and unheeding, unknowingly continued above them, haunted her waking hours and infiltrated her dreams with chilling, vivid clarity. Liam's parents, their health visibly declining under the immense strain of renewed grief and dashed hopes, made fewer and fewer trips from their quiet Vermont retirement home to Oak Haven. The journey was too physically taxing, the emotional toll of visiting the grave in the town that held such dark memories too heavy, too painful a burden for their aging, broken hearts. The house on Maple Drive, once again, after a brief, macabre return to the center of Oak Haven's attention, cast a long, dark, undeniable pall over the otherwise cheerful, well-maintained neighborhood. The Thompson family, understandably and deeply traumatized by their gruesome, life-altering discovery and by the subsequent invasive media frenzy and police presence, sold it as quickly and discreetly as they could, accepting a significant financial loss simply to escape its oppressive, tragic history and the constant, unwelcome reminders.
It was purchased, after some months on the market, by a regional property development company that, after a period of intense, often heated local debate, some longtime residents argued passionately for its demolition, for its complete erasure from the landscape as a mark of respect for the Hayeses and a cleansing of the community's trauma, while others advocated for its preservation, however grim, as a somber reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath even the most placid suburban surfaces. It was then quietly, almost stealthily, resold to a young, upwardly mobile couple new to New Hampshire, deliberately kept largely unaware by the developers and the tight-lipped realtor of the full, grim, horrific details of what had transpired within those walls just a few years prior. Yet local whispers, the indelible collective memory of a small town, and the ubiquitous, unforgiving reach of internet searches ensured that the house's profound, tragic notoriety would never be entirely, conveniently erased. It stood, despite its fresh paint and new, cheerful landscaping, as an unwilling, silent monument to an unsolved suburban horror, a place where the quintessential American dream had irrevocably, terrifyingly curdled into an enduring, inexplicable nightmare.
Detective Miles Harding, his face etched with the familiar weariness of a man who fights battles he knows he may never win, officially kept the Hayes homicide case designated as open and active, a bureaucratic status that held little practical meaning beyond a refusal to formally surrender. But active, viable leads had long since dwindled to an absolute, echoing nothing. The meticulously organized, now considerably thicker case files, filled with new reports, forensic analyses, and interview transcripts that ultimately led nowhere, were returned to their designated shelf in the quiet, climate-controlled archives of the state's cold case unit. The Hayes file joined the silent, somber ranks of countless other unsolved tragedies, a stark, depressing testament to the grim, frustrating reality that some crimes, despite the most dedicated, exhaustive, and skilled efforts of law enforcement, stubbornly, infuriatingly defy resolution. The killer, or killers, of Liam and Olivia Hayes had, it appeared with a chilling, almost taunting certainty, orchestrated a perfect, untraceable crime, or perhaps had simply, terrifyingly, benefited from an almost diabolical confluence of terrible luck for the victims and the inevitable, mercilessly erosive power of time. They had left behind a legacy of profound, unanswerable questions, a permanent, painful scar on the heart of a small, once innocent New England town, and a corrosive, insidious uncertainty that would forever haunt the lives and memories of those who had loved and so brutally lost Liam and Olivia. The silence that had first alerted Martha Peterson to an indefinable sense of trouble on that long-ago, deceptively ordinary Monday morning had, in a chilling, cyclical way, returned to Maple Drive. But it was a different, more profound, more permanent silence now. Not merely the silence of inexplicable absence, but the heavy, suffocating, eternal silence of an unpunished, unknowable, and deeply intimate evil. A lingering, pervasive shadow that Oak Haven and the shattered families of its cement sleepers would likely carry with them, unspoken and unresolved, forever.